Welcome everyone. Welcome to the second day of the WTC, and you are now watching the WTC Studio with me, Tomek Tweak from Contact Lost, and with my wonderful co-hosts. So, in order of appearance, Nathan Roberts.
Hi guys, I'm here for the gaming content and hopefully some expertise. And then I also have my friend Typhus.
Yeah, we're both WTC veterans, so we have all the experience that you can imagine. Probably more than 90% of the people in the room.
At least this 90%.
Yes, true.
Don't hype us up too much.
Just a little bit.
And then my name is Nathan also, but you can call me StatStat, I guess, for the purposes of this show.
Obviously.
And I'm from Stat Check, along with Typhus. I'm providing stat support, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Okay, so we are live from Mechelen. If you see some background, if you hear some background noise, this is the teams hyping themselves up because the second round is about to start. So yeah, that's the best proof that we are doing this live. You can follow this event in BCP, Best Coast Pairings. So all the pairings, once they are done, all the results of the games that will be trickling in, everything will be available in there. So make sure that you check BCP for all those things. And yeah, if you are in the area or it's possible for you to visit us, do come and see this for yourself because this is something extraordinary. There are so many teams, so many high-level players, so many people just enjoying themselves. We have our wonderful sponsors here, like the Army Painter with their stand. We have Wayland Yutani that provided the terrain for the tables. We have Hegemon Shop, who also provide the terrain for the tables. You can see all of them. They have painting stations. They have all sorts of stuff that you can come, see, and do, and enjoy yourself while, we comment this for you. So, guys, maybe just a couple of words of summary of yesterday. So what happened yesterday and what are we looking for today? Nathan, maybe I can start with you.
Sure. So yesterday we started with Seed 1 playing Seed 4 in the pods, and then Seed 2 playing Seed 3. Nothing too crazy happened. Thankfully, there was no major upsets. There was one draw out of all the rounds in a mission that was quite snowbally with the scoring. We had some interesting results with Scotland beating Iceland, which we thought might be tighter. But overall, nothing too crazy. Great start. But what we did notice was because of this mission, the points of each win are a lot higher than they might normally be.
Yeah.
Most of the wins, I believe, were over 100 points, which is the kind of benchmark standard of you need 86 points to win a round. Anything over 100 is usually, especially against top teams, is usually like a good point to get to.
Right. Typhus, your thoughts about yesterday, and then maybe segue to today.
Other than that one draw, what Nathan said, there was also one win where Seed 3 team won against Seed 2 team. That was Italy winning against Greece. But I think you can make an argument that Italy doesn't really belong to 3 because they got there because of some things they've done last year and they were carded. So they were knocked down in by placings by a few spots last year. So you could see that more as a C2 against C2, but Italy used to be a very good team. So that one is the best Seed 3 we have at this event, I think. So
yeah. All right. Nathan, do you have any stats to share with us about the previous round, or do you want to talk about...
We'll talk about this in a minute. I think what we want to let's talk about some maybe pairings and missions. And
all right, let's
talk
do that
about
then.
Maybe some interesting tidbits. I know everybody's got kind of like a question about if Teams has solved the Eldar riddle. And then I pulled some of the numbers yesterday and this morning and showed them to my co-host, and we'll see maybe if there is, in fact, an answer in Teams for Eldar. So why don't we go through pod by pod? And then
I think that makes sense.
Pod 1, and we can just switch back and forth.
Yeah.
So in pod 1, we have Croatia, Norway, Ireland, and Canada. We have our Seed 3s going into our Seed 1s, and our Seed 2s going into our Seed 4s. So we have Canada playing Norway today in this pod, and then also Ireland playing into Croatia today. Any thoughts on this pod at all, guys?
I mean, the Canada-Norway matchup seems interesting, having in mind what Norway was saying, that they try to upskill themselves. And Canada was arguably the lowest Seed 1 team, the worst of them last year, and with the least experience, to be fair. So that one is interesting. That one will be also streamed live on Wargames live stream, and we'll be grabbing the coaches later on to dive deep into what they think about how the pairings went.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that, because definitely during this stream, in this streaming window, we will have the coaches of both teams to actually discuss how the pairings went, what their preparation for the event looked like, and so on. So stay tuned for that. Sorry, Tysus.
I had nothing more to add. So
All right.
Since I have it in front of me, I'll just do the pods. Pod 2 is the UN1 team versus Luxembourg, Switzerland, and Germany for Pod 2. So that'll be Germany into Luxembourg and Switzerland into the UN1 team. Any thoughts on that today, Nathan? The UN1 is Malta, I believe.
Yeah, so again, like we discussed yesterday, the UN team is usually a mix of players. So historically, they've always had a bit of a disjointed. This is obviously a team competition, so how your team performs is usually benefit on how much practice you have. But out of this pod, it still seems like business as usual. Germany should come away with a pretty decent win. This is a interesting mission today. It does affect a couple of factions. This is the one where you can't deep strike onto objectives, I believe.
the
So
ritual Crucible of Battle
Yes.
and Chilling.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it does make things like GFC struggle a bit more. Deep striking heavy armies like
CSM.
For
CSM,
example.
USA's Grey Knight list.
Mhm.
WTC, yeah, that can't even deep strike onto an objective now. So that should affect things. But yeah, in that pod, I see business as usual. Switzerland, I would expect to win that round. Germany, I expect to win that round as well.
And then in Pod 3, we have Israel, Italy, Greece, and Sweden. So that'll be Sweden into Italy and then Greece into Israel today.
That is the other pod that I think is very interesting this round. As I just briefly mentioned earlier, Italy doesn't really belong in that seed 3. I think it is more of a seed 2 team, sometimes even fighting for that seed 1 spot historically. So Italy versus Sweden, where Sweden was also one of the worst teams from the seed 1, for a lack of a better word. That one is also interesting. We will also be having their coaches later on. And Israel against Greece, I think this one should also be a wash and Greece should take it easily.
And Sweden usually, historically, in the higher echelons of the WTC or the ETC.
Yeah, but
so
when you look at the history of Sweden, they were really good, but
Mhm.
back at the beginnings. And then they dropped off, I think, since 2017. Their performance
there was a decline,
has been quite lackluster.
Mhm.
They've done plenty of changes within their team, how they organize their team, a lot of new faces. So we'll see if that holds, because they were really good back then, but the skill and level of players truly went up.
So depending on the player availability, the second interview that we are going to attempt to do will be the coaches of Italy and Sweden. So we'll see which one happens first, but definitely we will try to get two. So we will try to get Norway and Canada and Italy and Sweden for your viewing pleasure right here in the studio.
And Pod 4 is Cyprus, Northern Ireland, Denmark, and the United States. So that'll be the United States into Northern Ireland, and then also Denmark into Cyprus.
So would it be an overstatement to say that the USA has a fairly easy group this WTC?
Yes. I
Right.
don't think that's an unfair thing to say. They should be coming out this pod like they did last year with a mammoth amount of points.
Mhm.
They've got quite an easy group last year. I think they've got quite
They
an
did
easy,
last year's.
quite an easy group this year. I don't expect any absence here.
Do we have any expectations towards Denmark? To be perfectly honest, I have very little knowledge about their performance historically.
Historically, they were a team that fought for podiums. They were on podiums a few times, so
Yeah.
they are not a team that you can just disregard for their skill and player level. So I can see them holding up to Germany, especially. I'm sorry, I just got interrupted whether I got a zinger from Sully. No, I told him to make it a surprise for me because I like to be pampered. So I'm waiting for him to provide me that zinger when I need it the most.
Yeah, the Zinger story.
Classic.
The Zinger story will have to be explained at what point because it's random as shit. But
I'd rather not. But yeah,
coming back to Denmark,
Denmark, I think this is another team that doesn't necessarily aim to win the event, but I think can be a future seed 1 team.
Yes.
Okay.
Then we have Pod 5 with his Czechia. You're not getting me.
Not this time.
Not today. Latvia, Austria, and Netherlands. That's Netherlands into Latvia and Austria into Czechia. Any thoughts on this one, Nathan?
Again, it seems a little bit like business as usual. I think, we probably will discuss it a couple of times. The first 2 rounds, there's not likely going to be too many upsets. There might be a couple more in this one, but predominantly it's the round 3 that's going to be a little bit more spicy. For this one, you would still expect Austria and Netherlands to come out on top in those matchups. Obviously, then when they face next round, that'll decide who wins that pod. But yeah, again, there's the difference between seed 1 and seed 2, and then seed 3 and seed 4. There's quite a gulf in there.
I might be stating the obvious because I can't really see the screen with our stream, but probably all the matchups should be on the rolling strip at the bottom of the screen. So if you're wondering which team is playing which and seed 1 versus seed 3 or seed 2 versus seed 4 doesn't tell you very much, the strip should be explaining it pretty neatly. So yeah,
In case you missed your pod.
In case you, yeah, exactly.
Pod 6 will be South Africa, Wales, Finland, and Poland. So that'll be Poland into Wales and Finland into South Africa.
I think business as usual. Again, Finland seems to be back to their team that was quite strong back in 2012, 13, and 14. So I see a lot of those faces that we started playing with when we were attending those events way back with Nathan. So they are back to their old ways. So I don't expect any upsets here. I think Poland should take a huge win against Wales, and Finland should also win comfortably against South Africa.
Yeah, I do hope Poland absolutely smashes Wales. Just saying.
So isn't Wales?
I sense no bias.
No.
Shouldn't we just assume that Wales, being part of the UK, attending the UKTC events and so on, they are well prepped for this, and they should know well what Poland is bringing and doing and planning?
Absolutely not. Well, I'll just give you one tiny story. Their Chaos Space Marine player submitted a list and then asked England about what we were going to submit. And we told him, and he said, "Oh, don't worry, I won't copy it." And we told him, deadline's already passed. So he didn't realize that he was trying to submit on UK time when we're an hour behind. So he didn't realize that list submission had already finished. Okay. So he had to take the list that he submitted, which was all.
Speaks volumes, but let's just assume it's just one player and the rest is...
Yeah. Sorry, Adam Ryland. I love you, buddy.
And then we have Pod 7, which is the UNA team or Slovakia, Iceland, Scotland, and France. So that'll be France into Iceland and Scotland into Slovakia. Should be an interesting one. So the Slovakia kind of had a bit of a towards the last second kind of situation with France, although France pulled it out fairly comfortably in the end.
Isn't Iceland versus France like a monster of a matchup?
I mean, you could say that, but at the same time, seeing how Scotland just dismantled Iceland, I'm not as hyped for this one, knowing that France should still be better than Scotland.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't it just the case of the mission yesterday for Iceland?
It might be. Yeah. It might be, but this doesn't bode well, at least according to me, for Iceland. So I'm not as hyped. Maybe it can be an upset, knowing that they collaborated, they tested together, but I'm not convinced.
All right. Okay. Before we go further with this, I just wanted to show you that we have our internal communication, and we do find out pretty quickly that there are some questions in the chat. So one of the questions was about yesterday's game between Australia and New Zealand, Chaos Knights into Necrons. Do you remember any about this and your thoughts on this game?
So I was watching a little bit of that game. So as we were talking about it yesterday, that mission heavily favors whoever gets to hold the objectives. And as you only know which one of the objectives stays for the late game at the very start of the game, you're already deployed. So if you are less mobile army, say Lichguard blocks, you have a problem to contest a marker that's already swarmed by 4 to 5 Chaos Knights, and you do not have enough damage output as Lichguard to just kill one a turn.
Yeah.
You usually need 2 turns to kill a baby knight with Lich
Yeah,
Guard.
you're supposed to be resilient, not killy.
Yeah, so that's an issue because then you kill one, then he swarms it, and just over OCs you.
Mm-hmm.
And also that game, what we mentioned yesterday, as you do not hold your own deployment zone objectives, if those Chaos Knights just go into the middle, stay on the middle, and you cannot take those objectives away, you are bound for a very high loss. And also that Chaos Knights are a faction that, if you do not have Chaos Demons as allies, it struggles a little bit with doing missions.
Mm-hmm.
Then, in this case, it being having so much advantage, having the board, etc., that faulty part of the army is not as prevalent.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So coming back to the France's group, is France the favorite to actually win that group, do you think, Nathan?
I think it all comes down to that last game. I think Scotland versus France. France sounded like they had a bit of a shaky start, but maybe they got saved by that snowball mission. I'm just going to call it that because that's just how the score kind of goes in that mission. So if Iceland can get like a draw or push France to a very small win, I would maybe think that Scotland has a very good chance of winning that round. And I think that group is still quite open for who's going to come out with the most points.
All right. Let's move on then.
Then we have pod 8. We only have one more pod after this one. We have Bulgaria, Romania, Spain, and England. We have England into Romania and Spain into Bulgaria.
All right. The matchup for England, again, Nathan, is that going to be a challenge? How do you feel about Romania?
I feel like it should be a relatively comfortable win. I feel like that pod it might have the biggest biggest gap between seed 1, 2 and seed 3, 4. I would say that England and Spain are both going to beat those two teams pretty comfortably, pretty handily, like we saw with Spain yesterday and England yesterday. And then again, it'll come down to the last round.
Typhus, any comments about, going into the event, I heard David Gaylord, I heard a couple of, authorities online saying that Spain's lists are wacky, they are weird, there's not a lot of understanding on how they work. Do you have any insight into this after round 1? Do you understand them better now, or are they still an enigma for you?
I wouldn't say they were necessarily an enigma. I would say they were rather unconventional choices, which is something that is related to teams practicing in basically contact loss, complete silence, no communication between teams. That 1 month since the edition release till the event, there was full media silence. No one communicated what they think. And I think this one might be a case of just a garage meta, how we call it, of teams practicing against each other, finding out what they find efficient within their own group. So I still think they are fine. So I think this is completely fine, and they will perform well. Choices like Blood Angels over other kinds of Marines are still fine because you have that one unit that just super killy with the Death Company, which can threaten any kind of Death Stars, and you see a lot of those Death Stars around running Deathwing Knights, Lich Guard blobs. They can handle those. So it might not necessarily be something overly wacky. It might be just a thing that they found they need to do during the pairings.
All right. Okay. Before we move on, I think there was a request from one of the listeners to explain what the mission is about. Nathan, are you well versed enough with it to actually
One
explain?
more time, our mission today is the Ritual, Chilling Rain, and then we have Crucible of Battle as the deployment style.
So to someone who is not as well versed with the names of the editions, like what do those mean actually?
I'm not great with the names either. However, Chilling Rains, obviously, there's no tertiary benefit. There's no, when you advance on a 6, you take a mortal. There's none of those kind of things. Quite a lot of the games this weekend are played with Chilling Rain. They do want to avoid any
Randomness, RNG?
really silly kind of things, which is why it was interesting that they did pick the mission yesterday, especially first round, that does allow you to score so highly. Normally, top seed versus bottom seed, they choose something very drawy to try and make it a little bit more competitive for, say, the lower teams. But today, this one, does stop you from deep striking on objectives. So like we said earlier, that affects certain armies' ability to actually score, especially mobility-wise. Lich card can't go into objectives, etc., etc. And then the actual primary for this one, just the one where you take the center out.
For Symbol of Battle,
This is the ritual.
yeah. I do not remember the name.
I can't remember the name of it.
I believe the
think
ritual
it's
is one where you generate additional ones in the center, correct?
Yes, that's the one. So yeah, this one's generating extra objectives.
You can definitely, like, if you can get an army into the middle with action pieces, you can generate a ton of objectives for yourself and kind of create like a little
Yes.
stronghold, basically, right?
Yeah. So it's one thing some say like a Necron army is very good in this mission because they can just basically like spawn the objectives close to them and then they go.
And I think this is a mission that armies that are in a bad spot in a given matchup can try to squeeze it a little bit by playing differently, creating markers, and just swarming their deployment zone or near their deployment zone with markers. So effectively, they have more markers to score, and even when they throw shit onto them, something will stick.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, like guard, those armies
Yeah.
kind of benefit.
Armies that do not necessarily want to push into opponent will be a little bit better off because they will realize where opponent will be fighting on the board and just go around and create markers that way.
Right. Okay. It definitely feels like a mission set that can result in ties on primary, especially, and kind of come down to some wiggling on secondaries, right?
But then again, it also adds that because the players are placing the objectives, it adds that tactical element of it can backfire. You put it in the wrong place, you get shoved off it, and then you're actually giving up.
But at the same time, I love this mission in terms of how the board looks at turn 4.
It's
silly. It's just
yeah,
silly.
it's like a pepperoni pizza. It's just like silliness everywhere.
You definitely need to look at like War Games or like probably one of the other streamers as well, and just kind of take a look at the beginning state with no objectives and the end state with all of the objectives. Hopefully, some of the players will leave the objective markers for last, so you can kind of get the image of somebody just kind of standing above and sprinkling objective markers onto the field.
So I need to ask a question. This is a question from my usual repertoire, let's say. But many a time when we were recording episodes, I asked the question comparing different terrain styles or terrain used at events. And one of them that I was always interested in was player place terrain. So something that players can actually affect, something that, as we discussed and established, adds a layer of skill probably, but could also create like a huge difference between the more skilled players and the less skilled ones, because again, another layer of brain work needs to go into this. So now we are talking about a mission where you have to move objectives. And again, is it similar? Like, is there a comparison between player placed terrain and player placed objectives?
So first of all, I think player placed objectives are way better than player placed terrain.
100%.
Because depending on what terrain pack you have, player placed terrain can create awful games that just are not enjoyable to play. But when it comes to player placed objectives, there is that layer of you understanding how a matchup will develop over each turn.
But you need to be able to predict stuff.
Yeah,
right?
so it gives those players that know how the games go, what their plan is, how they want to do it for turn 1, 2, 3, etc. Those players will benefit more. So this also is an approach that gives more for the players that already played given matchup a few times. So the preparation pays even more in those games.
Okay.
Because if you're also an attacking player against someone who's trying to defend, now you know that in this mission you might need to push the pedal to the metal and just go to kill your opponent.
Right.
So he cannot score because dead models do not score.
Okay. That's clear.
And then we have to do the last pod. I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I guess we don't have to, but the Australians would get upset and maybe throw that spear at us if we didn't talk about their pod. So pod 9 is New Zealand, Portugal, Belgium, and Australia. So that's Australia into Portugal and Belgium into New Zealand.
Again, do you think that this is one of the strongest groups, or is that an overstatement, Nathan?
Strong is maybe not the word. Interesting, definitely. Belgium are the prep kings, but when it comes to Swiss pairings, usually they faltered last year. So it would be interesting to see if Belgium come out of the more difficult games in that round with points. it's interesting to see New Zealand because we think they're one of the better new teams to come into the event. And if we were doing a prediction of where the new teams might finish, I would put New Zealand at the top. And obviously, we had New Zealand versus Australia yesterday. Geographically, that's quite an interesting match. But yeah, this round should still be a little bit more. Australia, the reigning defending champions, they should come out this round with 3 wins. But we're obviously here to see if they can lose something, because obviously that's interesting to us.
Right, Typhus, can New Zealand's performance already be somehow assessed after the game versus Australia, or have they actually been playing, one of the top teams, if not the top team to date? So it's not really, that indicative.
I think round 1 is not big enough of a sample to assess stuff like this. You need more games, more information to get a good grasp, because when you're only comparing a new team against reigning world champion, it can be quite rough to assess whether they are good. But when they are playing against those seed 2 teams, I think that's where you can prove whether you're worthy of getting into that top half of the bracket at the end of the tournament.
Okay. Do we know anything about Portugal? Is Portugal a player to be reckoned with, or rather, the bottom echelon of
So
the
last
WTC?
year, Portugal was a team that Portugal had a lot of mercenaries last year. So because of a lot of mercenaries, it was hard to assess them. As we mentioned, UN teams, if you have a lot of mercenaries, you're going for the very first time. There's no team cohesion. It's just difficult to perform as well as a cohesive team. This year, they have way more players from Portugal. So I don't think we can necessarily translate any of our experiences from previous year towards this year.
All right. Okay. I think what Joker has just handed me are the matchups for Norway versus Canada. I'm sorry, so sorry for this. Norway versus Canada. So maybe we can try and give some predictions of that. So
I can just read them.
yeah, you can read them out.
Yeah, you can read and we can discuss.
We have a Custodes mirror.
Stody's mirror is
On this mission,
On this mission.
it's sold out. Yes, you have
This mission
5 first on an objective.
yes. So normally
And
this matchup it's a little bit of it's not a draw, it's a swing, because it's a little bit more sometimes of somebody who gets on the objective. It's maybe difficult to take them off the objective, so going first is quite important. But in this one, where you place your own objectives,
And also, Canada has, from what I recall, 30 Custodian Guard, so 3 blobs of 10, which I think sometimes is a better choice
yes,
in a mirror.
especially because you can do basically in this mission, those guard units basically just plop down where they want rerolls to move.
And I think Canada has 2 blade champions, which add some mobility to those
I don't
blobs
think
as
that
well.
is as important, because
In this
usually you
particular
don't
game,
want to be the player pushing, because that one usually goes bad.
Yeah, but don't you think that this
Because
one
you
will?
need to be holding the marker to get rerolls to wound. So if you charge and roll too much for a charge or not enough, suddenly you lose reroll wounds.
Yeah.
Opponent is striking first, you're charging into wardens, they pop, feel no pain, and you do not deal enough damage.
I think one thing to talk about is that just kind of like a fine-tuned part of the combat phase, right, is when you talk about too long of a charge is not good. It's because every model that can get into base to base has to get. So if you roll a 12 on that charge, all of a sudden you have to put all of your 10 men into that, and that means none of them are going to be on.
And you can play around that by placing your units on a fringe of a marker,
in a way that you cannot place
so
more
that
models.
opponent needs to place them base to base outside of the marker. So there are ways to manipulate.
Yeah, there is some trickery that you can use. So does this matchup boil down to, like, I don't know, some mental chess and strategy, whether you, I don't know, stretch out or just run into your opponent? Or
So one thing, and we'll probably bring it up quite a lot, it's very, very common here. There are certain games where if you want to sit for a draw, you can sit for a draw. If one person pushes and doesn't trade well, they usually end up getting smashed. Or they trade super well and then they smash somebody. So this game seems a little bit more like, if somebody pushes and it doesn't go well, it's difficult to do that when custodes get to fight first. Effectively, you're almost charging in the wrong way. you'd almost rather get charged than charge in this matchup. It seems very much they'd be kind of crazy to go nuts with each other.
Especially with that reactive fight first, right?
Yeah.
Because the fighting priority has changed in this edition for the different brackets, basically.
So I'd say it's like 8 to 12, depending on what cards people.
Yeah. All right, Nathan. Subjectively, some other interesting matchups.
Oh, subjectively.
Subjectively from you.
I get to pick that.
Yeah.
I think
We have Eldar into Death Watch. So Canada's Death Watch player, which is, I believe, multiple Proteus teams with assault cannons, into Norway's Eldar player, which I believe is a pretty standard Eldar list.
I don't think it's as interesting.
It's only interesting if the Death Watch player is relatively hidden and the Eldar player thinks he has giant cojones and just runs at the Death Watch. If you run at Death Watch, things like the hammers and the extra shooting, they can drag stuff down.
Combined with
Yeah,
heavy thunder
That
hammers.
turn you double oath and do things like that, you can actually put things like Wraith Knights and units down. Desolation Marines can pick up the Wraith Guard squad if he's got one, just because you can go 2+ to wound, ignoring the T7 -1 to wound. But yeah, if the Eldos player's respectful, let's put it that way, it should be a comfortable 13-14.
Interesting.
What I find the most interesting out of all these matchups, I think, is Canadian orcs into Necrons.
Yes, that's cool.
That's because orcs are not as popular as an army choice, but they are excellent at pushing people from objectives. So I can see this being a pairing. If orcs go first, they can put so much pressure on Necrons that by the time Necrons get out of all those waves of boys, suddenly you are not holding those markers that you are generating, and some chaff is holding the markers that orcs generated. So you're putting enough pressure to just encircle your opponent, which I think is the pairing that I'm most interested personally to see how it unfolds, because also USA has orcs and they have the same build. And you know why they have the same build? Yeah. And you know why they have the same build? Because 2 weeks before list submission, they played 8v8 TTS screen, and Canada just copied that list after that screen. So I think they might have a reason.
So Canada and the orc list, very efficient at objective holding because they have those cheap transports.
Primary denial also.
Right. So yeah, so cheap transports with a lot of chaff inside. When they get on the objective, you actually have plenty of models that you have to get rid of to actually start scoring the objective. So it might be a challenge and an uphill battle for the Necrons.
The only thing that is hard for orcs is that they give out a lot of secondaries.
Mhm.
So if you can somehow engage, deploy teleport homers quite comfortably against them, if you still need to kill all those tracks, they give out, 30 points from Bring It Down? So you can try to play fixed into this given build because it's so skewed.
So judging just by the list, seeing, as we've discussed a second ago, that the Canadian Death Watch going into Eldar, for example, does that look to you from a third-person perspective, but also an expert, as Death Watch being thrown under a bus to actually, take down Eldar so that other players can play comfortably, or was it something that they desired?
I'd assume so, looking at the pairings, that at some point Death Watch was a defender, and because it was a defender, they just put Eldar and something else that counters Death Watch, say Chaos Space Marines,
And they picked.
and they were forced to pick Eldar. So
Okay, we have a question from the viewers about, I guess, yesterday's game of Polish.
yeah,
Polish
so
orcs.
Ghetto Polish Necrons.
Oh yeah, sorry,
Polish Necrons were playing against South Africa orcs. So
Yeah.
that, as we were talking about it, mission yesterday was very good for armies that put pressure. And if you can swarm the objectives before opponent just puts a feet on them, this is very hard to pull off. So that game where Ghetto was playing against orcs was a great example of that, with orcs just flooding the board, and then flooding the board in a way that Ghetto was closed on those markers that were disappearing early. So he just had no way. He eventually dug himself out, but it was turn 5 and it was not enough. And And I expect the same thing to happen here.
Okay.
Now we're going to do something that I know nobody really wants to talk about. We're going to talk about it anyways because I think it's interesting. So one of the questions that was going into the team's environment, especially the WTC, was, were we going to see the teams have kind of an answer for Eldar? And would that come with some counterplay, or would we see a pairing philosophy where we pulled out a couple times yesterday of somebody just kind of getting thrown under the bus, like, we don't know where to pair you into the rest of this team, so we're just going to put you into Eldar. You're going to lose, but that's okay. We're going to try to open up our matrix, essentially, to let other people get paired. So I'll talk a little bit about Eldar yesterday. They did end up with a 72% win rate overall for the round. It's not unexpected. You have a mix of philosophies, right, in this situation. So out of 36, they had 9 losses and 1 tie, essentially. And then they averaged a 15-5 by differential. So nothing like, I don't think, too out of expectation, maybe slightly lower kind of than we expected.
I'll say below.
Yeah, that's kind of below the average I thought it would be. Because they have a 72%, they have a 70+% win rate in singles, and now you can pick your matchups. So you'd expect them to really come away.
You'd expect to dodge GSC.
Yeah, anything that vaguely gives you any trouble, you can avoid if you want to.
And like one of the other features, obviously, is we're talking about different seeds of teams, right? So you have seed 1 going into seed 4, and like how some of these matchups are playing out. And like if we're seeing that, like maybe some of this is just kind of like seed 1 kind of picking on seed 4s just a little bit. And so we did see that 4 of the wins, the 4 of the 9 wins into Eldari this weekend by non-Eldari armies, 4 of those were seed 1s into seed 4 Eldari. Whereas only one seed 4 Eldari was able to, or only one seed 4 team was able to beat an Eldari player on the seed 1 side. This is getting to be like seashells by the seashore when I talk about seeds like this.
Yeah, but at the same time, that one game, seed 4 against seed 1, was Arek, who's playing in, I think, Croatia. And Arek was a guy who barely missed out on being in Team Poland. And he's playing also GSC, and he got 11-9 against Eldar. So a
very narrow win, right? It's not like
So many asterisks on it.
Yes.
It's just like, okay, it's this and this and this.
So tell me about the game of Poland Pumba versus South Africa's Leon. Leon was playing Eldar. Pumba was playing Thousand Suns. Is this a good matchup for Thousand Suns? Was it the mission, or did
one
Pumba
thing
just
that we need
deserve it?
one of the things that we really need to clarify is that the South African Eldar player didn't have a Wraith Knight, which changes
So much.
a lot, because suddenly Eldar will struggle to answer Magnus if they cannot target it with Wraith Cannons or Wraith Guard, because the Fire Priest, you can pass saves, 0 the damage, etc. So suddenly you do not have answers for Magnus, and it can just run rampant through your army. So, but what we've seen throughout the singles is, out of all the armies that are not Eldar GSC, Thousand Suns had the most wins when I was watching. This is an army that, unless you know how to play it as the Eldar player, you can be in for a rude awakening because you do not know what's going to happen. And suddenly you lose a key piece because you didn't understand how certain interactions work or what are the possibilities of Thousand Suns player. And then it can go completely sideways very, very quickly.
Yeah, when I was traveling to this place, I was listening to the Polish national team's podcast in Polish, unfortunately, so not available to everyone. But there was an episode with Pumba, and Duda asked him whether he's enjoying his Thousand Suns and enjoying the 10th edition. And Pumba, when we had him on Creme de la Creme, he was kind of critical towards 10th edition. But when I listened to the podcast yesterday, he said, from the high horse that I'm sitting on, meaning playing Thousand Suns, I'm really enjoying 10th edition. Thousand Suns have the feel like they are the most intricate army right now, with the most
Skill expression.
yes, that have the most thought, mind games, and so on going into the game. So yeah, you seem to agree with Pumba's view. So is Thousand Suns now like a well-balanced army, or will GW be, looking closer at them in the next Meta Watch? I haven't seen the Meta Watch video, so I don't know what their plans are.
So yeah, the current Meta Watch, I think they had them at a low 50%, so they shouldn't get any nerfs, which is kind of in a good place for them. Yeah, they if you're a really good player, you can get so much out of that army. You have a lot of options for building armies, which other factions don't. There's loads of tech pieces you can put in. There's loads of interesting things you can put in. They're good at scoring. They're good at cards. They're good at killing things in certain ways. They've got great stratagems. Yeah, by far, they're the most interesting and enjoyable army to play.
And many armies don't really have an answer to that amount of mortal wounds and so on, like no feel, no pains, etc. So
No, don't be no.
All right. Anything else about the Eldar?
The only other thing to talk about, I suppose, is that Pod 1 did average into Pod 4 of 13.
Seed 1.
Seed 1, sorry. Not pods. Seed 1 averaged 13 points going into Seed 4 as Eldari players. 14 if you keep in the 20-0 with CSM into Eldari. Closer to 13 if you remove it. So they were kind of breaking against kind of the theme for when you're looking at the numbers, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but that's it. No more for Eldar today. We'll kind of check
any
back
other
in
stats that you want to share? Or
not for now.
No.
But as we go, I will start bringing out some player data because I know people love to track how their favorite players are doing. But one round of player data isn't that exciting. So we'll kind of look at some average scores and stuff as we go.
Mm-hmm. So right now we're seeing teams actually getting at the tables. I think one of the most exciting games that we are going to see is, as we said, Canada versus Norway. So that will be on Board Games Live stream, and Adam Camilleri will be commentating on this. In a moment, we will have, I guess, the coaches of those teams joining us. I think someone is running around the room to try and fetch them for us. And then do it, or that. And then do remember that there are other streams going on. So we have the Spanish language stream, El Comprador. We have the French-speaking stream with French Wargaming. We have the German-speaking stream with Target Priority. So, yeah, make sure that you check them out if you prefer to have the coverage in that local language. And also, because they focus on their national teams. So if you want to see how France is performing, most likely they will be getting the French player onto the stream. If you want to see Team Germany play, it will probably be on Target Priority, and so on, and so on, and so on. I see that we have Jeremy Atkinson and the captain, the coach of Norway approaching slowly. So yeah, I think we should. Typhus was giving them a short briefing on how to use the mics, how to lean in, and et cetera, et cetera. So
You're gonna sit away from me. I feel very slighted by what just happened. That's okay. The Norwegian team gave me a jersey, so I like them better anyway.
You didn't ask.
Hi guys.
So I supposed to ask? Dang it.
Welcome. Like today, you are forgetting that we need to introduce the guests. So I'll let you introduce yourselves, and then remember, like Joker. All right. So Joker will tell us if the sound volumes are not okay or something. If we need to lean in more. But yeah, go ahead, Jeremy. Let's start with you.
Yeah.
Who are you? Why are you here? And what are your feelings toward the game?
Yeah, so my name's Jeremy. I'm the head coach for Team Canada. This is my second WTC. I did the same thing last year, except this time I brought an actual crew to do the work, so I can just sit here and talk with you guys.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is actually a match we were looking forward to. The Norwegians seemed like the strongest team in our pod. I think that this is going to be a really interesting match. I feel like we paired well. We'll see what my opponent thinks about that.
All right, so let's see.
Right. Hi, my name is Lasse. I am one of the coaches on Team Norway, and this is my first time here. So a lot of us are very excited. It's the first time for like half the team and all of our coaches. Because last year we came in here without any coaches, so that's an improvement. Yeah, we're really excited for the matchup as well. We think the pairing process went just like you said. It went good. We're pretty happy with it. We got our Necron player, got to play Orcs. He got rejected as usual, so he was really psyched for that. And yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. Like, we're a bunch of like no names, so we can upset something here, which is gonna be interesting. As you said, We feel like we are doing good in our pod, and this is the matchup that we have been. I'm not gonna say dreading, but it's gonna be a rough one, maybe.
All right, so
We'll see.
I need to ask because we've been just discussing this with Nathan and Typhus. The Canadian Deathwatch player will be playing against the Norwegian Eldari player.
Yes.
Is that correct? So is that desired or is that throwing Deathwatch under the bus?
Oh, Francois is going to hear from me later about this. That is very much a attempt to blunt.
Okay.
We're going to see how it works out. Francois is probably one of the strongest players on our teams. He has the capacity to scrounge for points wherever we need them. He gave me a prediction. I said, "You get that for me, and I'll be very happy. And I'll buy you lunch and a beer."
So what was that matchup in the Matrix? Was it a yellow?
It was an orange.
An orange.
Yeah.
Okay, but he has the tools to actually fight.
He does.
Against the Eldari, so the Desolators and so on. So.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Okay. What other exciting matchups do we have up there? Because I can't see the paper.
Oh, actually, I was going to ask you
Yeah,
the
go
same question.
Okay.
Throw your Thousand Suns player under the bus into an Eldar player from Canada, or do you think your Thousand Suns player can pull some points or even win that matchup?
So our Thousand Suns player has played the matchup before. He says that depending on, this is going to be very zinchy, but depending on what happens, the game might go in either directions, you know? No, he was one of those matchups where we said, okay, you can perform if you are able to. If you get the shots, he is able to take them. We were actually about to do the same thing that they did with the Deathwatch player, just put him into Eldar. He's like, yeah, we'll save that one for later. He's going to have fun with Necrons instead. So, yeah, I think it's going to be fine. I have 100% belief that Sondre will actually pull through.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah. He's playing my Magnus. That's why I'm saying that.
If he doesn't perform well, then
as long as my boy does good, then, you know, he did nothing wrong anyway. So,
what is kind of the pairing that you're most excited for in this one, aside from obviously your Magnus taking out an Eldar player?
yeah, well, as you said, other than that, we have our Custodes matchup. Our Custodes player is loving to play other Custodes players just so he can just spend half his clock talking about Custodes. So, I mean,
Are they just going to hit the clock back and forth, going towards a tie,
No,
just talking about how great gold is?
they have 30 minutes left on their clock. I'm like, yeah, where are you at? Oh, first turn. Still in movement. No, but I mean, it's going to be fun. As I said earlier, we have our Necros playing you guys' Orcs. That's exciting just because Orcs are always exciting. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see here what our Demon player can do against GC Lacoste as well. He got the first matchup decided on a coin flip. So table choice matters here. So we'll see if he can pull something through here. Yeah, as I said, underdog story. Just
I like
have
it.
to believe it, right?
Everybody loves a good underdog story.
Yeah, they do, except for Canada
Jeremy.
right now.
I mean, I'll be honest. We didn't view you as the underdog. We viewed you as the strongest player in our opponents in our pod.
Oh,
We treat every opponent, almost every opponent, as being a true challenge.
Yeah,
Right?
the victory tastes better.
It does. Like we go through it and we go through like, all right, we look at their list. The list look very strong. We assume that all of their players are as strong as our strongest players and pair and match based on that. We don't assume that just because Patrick threw away a game against Chaos Space Marines with his GSC last round, 18-2, that he's not going to mess up against Devin on stream.
So
Jeremy, I do want you to also answer the question. What is the pairing you're most excited for? What are you looking at that you think
It would
is
probably be the GSC and Demons. 5 big boy Demons. Our GSC player played that last round and 20'd it in 2 turns.
Oh,
So we'll see. We also know that he got first drop, which meant that his aberrants are sitting a very healthy 9 inches away from your deployment zone. And your Nurglings are off on the edges of the battlefield. So that'll be very interesting.
I know where the first aid kit is. It's fine.
and then the question that came in for both of you is apparently what team has the best beard?
Oh, you guys have it hands down.
Yeah, there you go. So
Yeah.
at
There
bare
is
minimum,
nothing
it is the
to do.
best beard.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
I also need to ask one question, and it's about the mission.
Yes.
So is that particular mission something that you teched for in any way? When choosing the armies for your team composition, or not for this
Not
mission
really.
specifically?
It's really difficult to tech for a single mission when you're going to be playing 7 of them, and all 7 of them are being wildly different.
Yeah.
There were definitely pairing choices that were made based on the mission because it is the ritual. You just have the single objective in the right on, because it's always a question of if your opponent creates an objective and you can just shove them off, you don't need to make them on your own and waste resources. So there is a lot of what does your opponent do that dictates the way that the game is going to go.
Pretty much. How about you?
Yeah, it's the same. This is one of those missions where you are creating your own battlefield, basically. You're creating your own objectives. So it's going to be, thinking it's going to be pretty close scores all around, except for the tables where people get table turn 2 or 3. That's going to be, as you said, 20-0 no matter what. If that happens. No, but it's one of those games where normally it's pretty close score-wise. And as you said, being able to tech for one specific mission out of 7 and just make sure you win that one makes all the 6 other missions not as great. So, yeah, no, we just made sure that people know the mission before we sat down and did the matrix and everything. And, yeah.
What do you think is the pairing that you're dreading the most, hearing the results from when you walk by? Is it that Gene Stewart Cult Demons one? Or is it something else that's on the table?
Well, it might be that. It's also the Eldar matchup. It's, you never know what's going to happen. And again, our player playing Ascari, if you take player skill out of the equation, I think he's fine as long as I watch this dude like every week.
Ascari looks like he's getting pretty ego inflated, and he's going to ascend into Overlord status like suddenly at the table.
So Scary has definitely adopted the Overlord mantra. So we pivoted to him very last minute after trying Drukari, and we realized that the Archon was going to have to take a nap, and the Overlord was going to rise.
Dr. Archon, Mr. Overlord, or whatever you call it. But I need to ask this. You have 2 players on the stream right now.
Yes.
So does that play any role? Like, is there more stress connected to playing on the stream? Can your players handle it?
I can't speak from Patrick's perspective because I don't know him as well, but Devin is a veteran. He's been playing, I think this is his 3rd ETC or WTC now. He's been in and around the North American competitive circuit for years. He generally doesn't break under pressure. Now, his army's probably going to break horribly under the GSC, but if he can get me the prediction that we were hoping for, then we'll be very happy.
Okay. And how about your player? Is that something common to play on stream? Is there any pressure connected to it?
So we don't have that many stream games in Norway, actually. We're working on getting that up and running. Patrick has been our captain now for the captain for this year, but he's been here, I think, 2 times now as well. He's playing in every competitive event that is a actual competitive event, not an 8-man event in Norway. Basically, prepping for this. This is a matchup he would like to enjoy playing. Being on stream, I don't know, we're going to make sure that he is comfortable in doing what he's doing best. I have complete faith in him. He chose this. So what happens is still on him, but, it is a dice game as well, so things can happen that can upset everything here, so should be good.
And thank both of you for being able to take your time to kind of come over here. I know you both have more support staff, so this is a little bit easier to do now. But thank you both for coming over here and sharing a little bit of the experience for pairings and also kind of your thoughts on some matchups.
Yeah, thanks for all the insights.
Jeremy, I will not forget this slight.
Listen, Nathan, you get to be on camera with me every single week. We gotta get the more beautiful beards together here.
I'm not mad. I'm just mad at you specifically.
All right, everyone. In a moment, we will have the coaches of Sweden and Italy with us. So stay tuned because there are some more interesting interviews coming up. Thank you, gentlemen.
Pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Yeah. This is the meanest shit, by the way. This is just the meanest thing somebody could say.
I don't know what it says.
Yes.
Sam, I'm gonna take your trophy back
Hello.
from Will.
Hello, guys. Hi, guys. So, I guess they are doing small talk now, so let's wait.
No, it's fine. Let's do our introductions and stay on schedule.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, okay. So let's start with the introductions. Who are you? Who are you? Why have we invited you?
That's a good question.
The first two are easy. I'm Sebastian, coach for Team Sweden, and I'm here because apparently I have nothing else better to do.
To do right now.
I'm also facing this gentleman from Italy.
Yeah.
That's so cute.
So I'm Alessandro, coach of Italy, and I'm happy to join this stream.
Fantastic. So you are done with the pairings process already.
Yep.
How did it go? Did it go according to your matrices? Are you happy with how it came out?
I mean, this is always the interesting answer. I think we're pretty happy, but sometimes the other guys say, "Oh, we're really happy." When we faced Germany last year, and they totally blow us up. So, I don't know.
Yeah,
You want to spoil?
I think they did a better pairing than us, even in the last defense. We didn't expect their last defense, so they are quite in advantage on these pairings.
Is there a pairing that you're most excited to see, like the result of right now? Is there a pairing that you're most excited to see come out?
The Orcs against the Elder, and their Chaos Knight against our Zeren Steerer cult.
And then for you?
I kind of agree. Orcs are always a wild card. That's why we bring them. I mean, not everyone has that much practice against them, so maybe it will do well.
All right. Now, how about the other game? Because you said Chaos Knights versus GSC, right? So,
Yes.
so is this actually a challenging matchup for the GSC? Can the Chaos Knights put up a fight in this because they have like a lot of OPSEC units that run across the table and so on, or is GSC the favorite for this?
I mean, I'm not the best tactician. That's why I'm just a coach. So I can't really spoil our tactics here. So I will just say, I believe we think this is Knight favored, possibly.
Okay. All right.
And then what are you doing in your pairings to kind of get this mission? Did you make lists, kind of tweak them for this mission? Or do you kind of have some generalists that you're hoping can kind of generate a bunch of objectives and then kind of take the middle and kind of hold them? What's kind of your thought process behind it?
I mean, we don't tweak lists that much for these matches because this is, no offense, this is only game 2, only the pod. I think it's better to be prepared for the possibly later order missions if you want to play side.
Okay.
I think that would be our answer.
I think we also list very mixed for the missions. We didn't focus on the pod.
Okay. So, what do you think about the mission itself? Are your players well prepared to play it, or is it just one of the 7 and there's nothing special about it?
I mean, I think it is one of the 2 most special ones we are playing here. And we absolutely have to take that into account when we do our pairings. We have played it since we knew it existed. I think it switched pretty late.
Yeah.
It was another mission earlier.
I think so.
Yeah. So we are as prepared as we can get, I guess.
Okay. All right. How about it?
We didn't have the time to try this mission.
Great. I'm upping our pairings. Let me give me a moment.
What is the pairing you're most worried about? Is there a pairing you're concerned about that's coming up right now?
It's the Orcs Elder.
It's all the Orcs and Eldar.
I mean,
The Orcs, because our Elder player never play against Orcs this edition. So we try to let him understand what the Orcs can do, but there will be some moments where the Orcs can do something that he didn't expect. So
Yeah, the Orcs are chaotic at the best of times, and
yeah,
also
I
at
played
the worst
Orcs
of
in the
times.
singles, so I try to explain how the Orcs play.
yeah, and also, I mean, Eldar, everyone knows they are the big dick energy team. They're here to take the 20s.
Yeah.
It's always nerve-wracking. What if they fucking don't? That's a problem. So that's always nerve-wracking.
Exactly.
So, tell us something about your preparation for the event, like and the army selection. Like, how many test games have you played? Did you have players who almost treated this like the second job in the preparation for this event, or not so much? I mean, I know that Poland, for example, had this approach. So how did you prepare for it?
I mean, we have an advantage in that we have in Sweden 5 weeks of paid leave every summer. So
Okay.
we have less preparation than some, but more time than others. I think most of our players have maybe somewhere between 30 and 60 preparation games.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we
Yeah, I'm asking the question to see those. Yeah,
You missed all the hand gestures
We actually
too.
did a lot of tests of our player. I've done mostly 4 games at all, so very strong preparation and only one meeting together.
yeah.
Okay.
Very strong.
We also only had one real boot camp stream. Otherwise, a lot of TTS like everyone else.
Yeah,
We also prepared a lot by eating spaghetti with ketchup and pizza with pineapple. Did you?
Come on.
This is becoming very unfriendly very fast.
yeah,
It's like
exactly.
ketchup on spaghetti. You're gonna wake up with a horse.
Yeah, but not ketchup. It's also not a pineapple pizza.
Oh wow, I didn't see that going
This
that
is
way.
the true rivalry forming right now is going to be you two in the next WTC. I expect some taunting videos of breaking spaghetti and things like that. That'd be great.
So is TTS popular in Italy as well? Because
Yes,
like
it is popular from Italy community is quite over, so only the youngest player of Italy can play on TTS often, and there are 10 players. 10 players in total that can play in TTS really well.
and do you have like a developed community? So for example, today will there be a lot of players in, I don't know, in Discords or in Facebook groups or following YouTube channels trying to get the latest on the coverage? Is there like a following?
The coverage for Italy will be done by me and the other coach.
Mm-hmm.
We brought here around 10 players, and we are trying the last years to bring the community to understand WTC and come more players and more often.
Mm-hmm. All right, and how about Sweden? Is there like a huge following, and do you have people with some high expectations rooting for you?
I mean, huge is a wrong word because we're a tiny ass country in the middle of nowhere. But
Tiny is also relative. I suppose.
yeah, we have for our size, we have a pretty big community, a pretty nice competitive community. A lot of them we think like of as extended members of our team. We have some tests. So yeah, we don't have much coverage except more like you do. I go around drunkenly insulting other nations.
Yeah.
On
That's
Team
kind of
Sweden
coverage.
40K on Facebook. Like and subscribe.
Okay. All right, Nathan. Any other questions? Yeah, I think that's it for the time being. So thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, good luck,
Thank you.
and please enjoy the event. All right.
Cheers.
To our listeners, as we've mentioned, there are language streams for you to follow. If you haven't checked them out already, War Games Live doing the coverage in English, covering one of the Canadian games right now. There is Target Priority covering in German. There is El Cobrador covering in Spanish, and there is French War Gaming Studio covering in.
Did you remember the German one
French.
as well?
Guys, welcome back. Do you have any news, any updates? Have you seen any interesting when walking around the room?
So we essentially went through the Canada versus Norway matchup, assessed all the pairings, talked it through. We even went to Josh Roberts from Team England to have his opinion on the Custodes mirror because he played it more than we did. That one is for sure. And so we went through it and we assessed all of them to give it for more games live as well, so they can have our assessment of the matchup. Anything particular that struck to you, Aidan?
Yeah, there was a couple of interesting games. I think because we got to see vaguely who went first in a couple. So the Necron Orcs that we were talking about, the Necrons going first does make a big difference. Stops them getting absolutely drowned and pushed off all the objectives. So that's really important for them. That actually probably pushes the score back to more like a draw. The GSC opponents for both teams kind of look like they're going good. I'd give them the favor in both.
GFC against Big Demons is goddamn awful for Big Demons.
Yes, that was the only 20 that we put in.
That's the only 20 that we estimated according to the tables. The other one was GSC against Thousand Sons. I think unless Thousand Suns player really knows what they are doing, they are bound to lose this quite hard. So, anything else?
Then we had the other way round, which is the Thousand Suns into the Eldar. Now that was one of the tables we went and looked at, and if you play for a cagey game, Thousand Suns can actually take out small wins against Eldar. But he looked like he was going first, and he went full cojones on the table, and looks like his Thousand Suns on halfway up the table. So we'll see how that
It
goes.
looked like trading Sorcerer with 10 rubrics for a Warwalker, which doesn't seem like the best trade.
The only thing I can think he's trying to do, because in a ruin in front of that unit that he's pushed are 3 D cannons, so he might be trying to go for the indirect, and he's trying to kill some D cannons, just to
Or
stop
charge
him
them
and
and-
charge them. Yeah, but then again, there's warp spiders behind that, who, as we saw, were jumping out in front of the way. So it's like, okay, now you can't maybe charge them.
They Phantasm in front, so if you charge, then you cannot pile in into those D cannons to prevent that. So those small plays.
We are starting to get pairings in as well. I'll pull up kind of some of the interesting matchups while you guys talk.
Yeah. So to go further, there's the Death Watch against Necrons matchup, where Scari's main Necrons. We had different opinions on that one, which is interesting, but we think this is a drawish matchup. I think it is slightly more favored for. This is slightly more favored for Necrons, whilst Nathan thinks it's slightly
I
more
thought it was
favored.
slightly better for cards for Death Watch.
Okay.
So what I wanted to do is kind of go through Iceland and France's pairings, because that was a matchup we were kind of interested in earlier. We thought it might be a flag kind of indicating like what direction we might see for the Scotland and France matchup as well later. So it looks like for France, we have their Custodes going into Iceland's Death Watch. We have Thousand Suns in a mirror match. We have Necrons into Necrons, also a mirror match. Gene Stealer Cult into Eldari, which is kind of following suit with some of the matching that we've seen across the first round of the event. Black Templars into Chaos Space Marines. Guard into Custodes. Eldar into Imperial Knights, which it seems like throwing the Iceland Imperial Knights kind of to the wolves in that matchup. And then
If
also,
that's not a 20, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
and then we have Chaos Space Marines into Gene Stealer.
Okay, can we go through them one by one?
Sure.
I think,
We'll start at the top.
yes.
Let's talk about Custodes into Death Watch.
I think that one is Custodes' favorite.
Yeah, it's usually around the 13th, 14th customers. If it's if it's smaller units, maybe not, but if it's big units, and especially if it's Warden heavy, yeah, it's
How about the Thousand Suns mirror?
that's the most difficult game here.
Yeah, that's probably in this whole hole. This is the most skill-intensive matchup
Yeah, I would
that's
say
happening this round.
it's most
This is
down to the
such
skill
a
level.
5D chess game
Mhm.
of you understanding what are the interactions and what every of your single decisions will bear onto the
Yeah,
game.
it's a test of the understanding of your own army. In this.
These two are actually playing a game, not like these Eldar players who just roll the sixes.
And then we have two Necrons players.
Oh, that one is awful.
It's the opposite. Those two are just kind of bumping into each other.
That feels like a tie, kind of, right?
Yeah,
Like neither does it.
Depends on build, maybe.
Depends on the list.
Yeah.
If you are heavier into Necron Warriors, like Liam Hackett went, it can be better into Lich Guard at times because you will just outscore them.
It's more upside.
But that's the
But neither of them have the ability to actually kill each other.
Yeah.
So,
So I need to ask about the CSM into GSC. Is it down to how many obliterators the CSM have, or it doesn't play any role in this matchup?
I don't think it does.
usually that goes GSC way.
Mm.
Because you want to use the Nergal strat to not be targetable, but then if something is within 3 of you, it's hard to be out of 12.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So I guess we can talk through like just the Necrons list, and we can kind of try to maybe tease apart if there's some differences here. So for Iceland, they have 3 Hexmarks destroyers. So we might have some Hexmark duels based on the very brief glance I got at the France list. We have the a Lord with the Veil of Darkness, Oracan, an Overlord, and a Technomancer as the characters.
So this already signifies one warrior blob later in the list.
So we have one Canoptic Reanimator, 2 units of Thralls, a 5-man Death Marks, 2 Doomsday Arcs, and then a Locust Destroyer just by himself, 3 units of Heavy Destroyers, 10 and 2 10-man Lichguard bricks, actually.
Yeah, but the other Lichguard brick has war sites, which changes a little bit because when you are playing war sites, you take Orican the Diviner to give them 4+ Invul. And sometimes, what was the other character that can join them? I think it's
A Lord or an Overlord.
yeah. You can put Lord or Overlord, so you do not have access to Fimo Pain. So that unit has 4+ Invul and hits way harder because of the devastating wounds. And Orican himself, when he goes Super Saiyan, is also very good at melee.
I like that as the wave for what we're talking about. And then for the French list, what we have is 2 Hexmark Destroyers, Nemesis Xandric,
He has Vect, so it's a Lord that has Vect.
an Overlord with a Hypermaterial Ablator, 2 Technomancers, and then a Transcendent Catan, which is not in the and that one has the 4+ Feel No Pain from something.
Yeah, obviously.
And then we have a Canoptic Reanimator, 2 units of Scarab Swarms, 2 units of Thralls, 3 Doomsday Arcs, a single Locust Heavy Destroyer, which I assume is just to pop out and do some secondary missions, and then also 2 20-man bricks with these both have shields.
So it looks drawish.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, it's still pretty drawish.
The difference is you have either 3 Doomsday Arcs or 2 Doomsday Arcs and a little bit more units around it. So I don't expect anything else. Maybe if you have the Catan, you are a little bit better when it comes to certain missions, because you can just teleport around and try to do the missions. But I still wager it's around the draw and based on the secondary drawing which missions we get.
All right, guys, conscious of time, I think we can squeeze in one more question from our viewer. And this is actually a very interesting question that I wanted to ask at some point as well. And it's about the mirror matchups. We've mentioned a bunch of them, Custodes, Necrons, and so on. When is a mirror a desirable thing, and when do you aim to avoid it? Like, is it something that pops up very often, or shouldn't really? Nathan, maybe I'll start.
It happens. You tend to avoid them because unless it's, say, certain armies where you know it's kind of a draw, sometimes they're volatile. If it's say Eldar versus Eldar or GSE versus GSE, it can be that's massive for these rounds because your best army now got smashed. So you ideally want to avoid the super volatile ones. The times you kind of pick them is how it affects the rest of your matrix. So sometimes you might go, well, a mirror into a mirror is potentially a draw, but that actually takes up a bad matchup for the other 3 players you have left, for example. So it's something you sometimes take that gamble to free up the pairings.
And also, there is another thing you can see that some teams prepare their armies to be better into mirrors. That's also something that you can tech into. It doesn't necessarily apply to GSC and Eldar, I think, but it applies to, say, how you build Necrons. So, case of Liam Hackett's list, which is built to also win mirrors, or that, again, Aussie Mid, I think they should be favored into Monster Match with the whole hordes just swarming the board. So there are certain builds that you can create that will be favorable in a mirror, but when it comes to a mirror of the same list, there are usually small tweaks that will impact. Like there's a Custodes mirror happening right in front of us. One of the players has Kalitus Assassin, the other one does not. That Vect, so by Vect we mean make a stratagem,
Cost more
by 1 CP, is also combined with the fact that nowadays when you have a certain strat costing 0 ability, it works in a way that the first use of a strat costs that additional CP. So say fight first or -1 damage costs 3 CP, but the one that's reduced to 0, then because reducing is happening before you apply modifiers, then it still costs 1 CP. So suddenly you cannot use those strats as effectively. So this can be another resource fight within the game.
Yeah,
That's definitely a deep cut into a CP economy for Custodes that usually is pretty smooth with few bumps, thanks to being able to make stratagem cost only 0.
Going forward with the matchup that we're going into,
Okay, then we have Gene Stealer Colt versus Eldar, which feels like somebody trying to pair. The Eldar list is 20 Wraith Guard and a Wraith Knight, I believe. The Gene Stealer Colt list is pretty standard.
I think it will be better if we now let you check the matchups out yourself with the streams that we are providing, that War Games Live and our other partners are providing. We will bring this to the close, and we will let you enjoy the games. And the Discord banter and so on. And then we will come back closer to the end of the round. I hope that Joker in a moment will place our schedule on the screen again for you to see when we are going to come back. So tune in for that. Before we let you go and before I say farewell to my co-host, please do remember that the Army Painter has actually provided some goods, as I think we can call it a giveaway to our patrons. So out of the pool of people who sign up to our patron, to our patron throughout this event until the end of the event, we will be doing some sort of a raffle, or we will be choosing one person who will be getting some gifts from the Army Painter. So please go to our patron. Hopefully Joker will paste the link to that in either the description or in the chat. Do help us out so that we can bring better gear and come better prepared for future events. And you might get a reward from or an award from the Army Painter, which is, I think, cool, and we thank them a lot. Also, do make sure that you check out the other sponsors that you can see on the screen, or that you can see on the stripe at the bottom of the screen, because without them, this thing simply wouldn't be possible. So thank you to the sponsors as well. Thank you, guys, and I'll speak to you in a couple of hours.
Bye-bye.
Bye.